You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Thursday. It's June 26, 2025. Thanks for joining us on CorsiNation.com, and you can follow me on X at CorsiJerome.1 and Substack JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. Let's start out with the war between Israel and Iran. I think now it's pretty well established that despite the attempt by CNN and this reporter who keeps publishing nothing but lying CIA narratives saying that Iran's nuclear program was only set back maybe 3 months, based on a preliminary assessment. Completely what they do is like the same reporter supported the Steele dossier, like the Russian collusion, which was completely fabricated. She supported the 51 intelligence agents that said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. I mean, all these narratives are designed to deflect from the true story. And the true story in Iran is that President Trump did launch a strike that did massive damage to the nuclear program of Iran. This bombing attack, which was spectacular, I think historic, demonstrates the power of the United States, the firepower of the United States, which is massive and it has to be reckoned with. Now, the Institute for Science and International Security came out with a report yesterday. I guess it was June 24th. It was 2 days ago. It's just getting reported right now, and saying that the damage done to the nuclear sites, principal nuclear sites in Iran, has been massive. That includes the Natanz nuclear complex, the Fordo site underground, the Esfahan nuclear complex. Okay, and it goes on with several other sites that are less well known, including their heavy water production plant, which was likely so destroyed it will not be able to help them produce plutonium. Statement: overall, Israel and U.S. attacks have effectively destroyed Iran's centrifuge enrichment program. It'll be a long time before Iran comes anywhere near the capacity it had before the attack. That being said, there are residuals such as stocks of 60%, 20%, and 3.5% enriched uranium. The centrifuge is manufactured but not yet installed at Natanz or Fordo. These non-destroyed parts pose a threat as they can be used in the future to produce weapon-grade uranium. Okay, now there's nothing to stop Iran from going back into the nuclear business, and Iran says it wants to do that. But the point is, we've handled the threat today, because right now Iran has no capacity to produce and deliver a nuclear weapon. And you're seeing here very many detailed sites of the underground nature of what was destroyed. And we haven't been in these sites yet. And I don't think the Israelis have been. Certainly the IAEA is not going to be allowed back in, the International Atomic Energy Agency of the UN, because the Iranians aren't going to permit it. Now, Trump is saying he wants to negotiate with Iran. He's not going to get an agreement to stop enriching uranium. As long as these mullahs continue to control Iran, Iran will continue to be rabidly anti-Israel, and will continue to resolve to want to destroy Israel. The only way to get that changed is to have a situation in which the mullahs are removed from power. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime near soon. Although I don't know for sure, because once we don't have yet coming out of the bunkers, trying to reestablish some civil society in Iran. That hasn't happened yet. If Iran has difficulty getting back with any revenue, we continue sanctions and keep Iran out of the oil market, the mullahs are going to have a hard time maintaining political stability in Iran that's been this badly damaged by the attack. What I do know is throughout the Middle East, when you look at what's gone on in the Gaza with Hamas and the continuing attacks there to sweep Hamas out of the Gaza. When you look at Lebanon and Hezbollah, where some 800 leaders or more were blown up with their beepers blown up by Israel. Syria, where Assad is out. And now Iran, where Iran has been devastated by massive attacks on its nuclear program. Radical Islam has been set back decades in its attempt to destroy Israel. And there is an opportunity here for President Trump to come forward with the Abraham Accords and to reestablish a Muslim countries who are not rabidly anti-Israel to agree to accept the existence of Israel and to start working with Israel. This could rebuild the Middle East. We have an historic opportunity where this could happen. And again, Donald Trump has done a lot, but he can't force the end game. If we try to go into Iran and force a regime change, over time that doesn't work. We've had very effective ability, and again, this case demonstrates it, just like we did in Iraq, like we did in Afghanistan. The initial military operations can be very successful. Long-term occupation, however, proves to be very difficult. Now, we do have bases in the Middle East, and we probably will maintain those. But again, I think the major damage done to the nuclear facilities, and Chris is showing you the analysis from this IS group, which is the report of which I think is the most accurate so far, the Institute for Science and International Security. And if you take a look at the report, they've got diagrams, they've got analyses, they know exactly where the bombs hit. They can tell you exactly what the damage was to the underground facilities. And Israel also had operatives on the inside in all these facilities that were willing to blow them up from the inside. So again, we don't have a full damage assessment, but I think my conclusion is that the program was significantly set back, maybe decades, and with the help of God, maybe Iran will never again have nuclear capacity to the point where it was near producing a nuclear weapon, maybe even within days or weeks. This, I think, has been eventful and historic. Donald Trump then went to NATO, and NATO treated Donald Trump with deference this time. And he's getting NATO to commit to more money for their defense, which is important. But even more important is scaling back the alliance. I would have been just as happy to pull out of NATO. I don't think we need NATO any longer. I think Russia now is looking at Finland and Sweden. Russia gets very nervous as these NATO forces get on the border with Russia. And this goes back to 1939, when Hitler and Stalin had a non-aggression pact for a while before Germany invaded Russia. Russia was going into Finland to protect its northern access to the sea, and it was going into Ukraine. So these are historic objectives for Russia to protect its territorial sovereignty and have access to the Atlantic Ocean, which it has through the North Sea and through the Black Sea. And try to cut Russia off from access to the Atlantic is a very, very bad idea. Okay, so I think President Trump in general has had a very, very successful week, and his numbers and popularity could not be any higher than it is right now. Now, I want to go to the story which I've also pulled out here, which is that essentially the Democrats look to me like they're in a dumpster dive. I mean, that's an article here, which is a Liberty News at the moment. It's being run, saying that it's by Tom Donner, saying everywhere from their stance in New York City mayoral race, where they're supporting a socialist Muslim, to the policy on Iran, where they were supporting the Iranian regime. The Democratic leaders now are doubling down on the worst policies imaginable. The party's about satanic already. So, the party doesn't realize that it has to abandon the progressive policies that repel the broad center of the electorate. People are saying they don't want to be Democrats anymore, and I don't wonder, I think that makes sense. But when they put their thumb on the scale to ensure that Bernie Sanders would not be their presidential candidate in 2016 and 2020. Hillary Clinton rigged the 2016 election with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's what the first dump of Assange's emails showed. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned the day the Democratic National Convention opened up in 2016. Okay, and then Kamala Harris, comes around. Joe Biden withdrew, and Michelle Obama did not get the nomination that Barack Obama was trying to engineer in the shadows. Well, now it looks like Barack and Michelle are at odds now. Okay, so all of these things, this Mamdani, who's the son of parents who've been rabid anti-Israel activists. His father is a Marxist professor at Columbia University. Oh, that's the ground zero for the post-October 7th protests. He's known for his anti-Israel views and his obsession with, quote, colonialism. Okay, so Mamdani is going to empower the pro-Palestinian activists. He's going to throw gasoline on the fires between New York's pro and anti-Israeli advocates. He'll say universal health care, free child care, free public transit, rent controls at a $30 per hour minimum, all paid with taxes on the rich. Okay, well, that'll just drive out of New York anyone with wealth, undermine the tax base. And he wants to create a Department of Community Safety that will replace police. He's going to send out social workers to many 9/11 calls, and that's going to negatively impact public safety. New York's going to become a much more dangerous place. So these Democrats are insane, except I maintain they're not insane. I think they've just become satanic. First, the Democratic Party, was moving to a communist party, which it did. Now it's becoming a anti-American insurrectionist party, and so now then finally it's going to embrace Islam, pedophilia, and every other kind of madness you can think of. And to say Democratic Party is embracing pedophilia is not a far reach when you realize critical race theory was aimed at grooming the youth with all these sex change operations in the schools, telling kindergarten kids that they were, that their sex was different than their gender. Their gender was whatever they imagined. These kids don't understand sex. I mean, it's insanity. Okay, I'm going to play one more story, and then Chris, I want you to comment. I want to play this video we have from Jason Jones. And Jason Jones was a Border Patrol agent. I need to get in touch with him because look, he's revealing things that I also know to be true. So go ahead. Let's play Jason Jones.
I state without reservation that the United States federal government is the world's largest child sex trafficking organization in modern history. The probability that thousands of these UACs are being raped at this very moment
Unaccompanied
is
minor.
100%. Chairman Higgins, Ranking Member Correa, Chairman Bishop, Ranking Member Ivey, and the members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the evil of child trafficking caused by the open border policies under President Joe Biden and his administration. I served in the United States Border Patrol for 24 years until I retired as a Deputy Patrol Agent in charge in San Diego sector. I worked under 5 presidential administrations, and only one president secured the border, President Donald Trump. Border Patrol agents went from working and being supported by the greatest border president in American history to the worst, President Joe Biden. My last year in the Border Patrol was Joe Biden's first year in office. On his first day in office, I watched in disbelief as 94 executive orders cascaded down from Washington, D.C., obliterating every immigration policy that had been provided the most secure border in America's history. Border Patrol agents were forced to carry out unconstitutional orders that violated every law in the Immigration Nationality Act. President Biden, through Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, created policy out of thin air, ignored federal immigration law, and facilitated the largest mass invasion into America that the world has ever seen. The United States of America will have spent hundreds of billions of dollars in 4 years to fund the needs of over 50 million illegal aliens that populate our nation. Between 1 in 6 and 1 in 7 residents in America is an illegal alien. America has suffered the greatest demographic shift in modern history. After serving in the United States Border Patrol for 24 years, spending a year researching and writing a best-selling book entitled Invaded, The Intentional Destruction of the American Immigration System, and filming 2 documentaries, I state with complete certainty that Biden, Harris, and Mayorkas intentionally, strategically, and purposely weaponized illegal immigration and used it as a tool to fundamentally transform America. Inside this invasion, the unspoken evil of child trafficking, and more specifically, child sex trafficking, has flourished. At the end of this current administration, the number of children trafficked will have grown to over 550,000 unaccompanied alien children known as UACs. This horrific number of children will have been arrested, released into America, and then lost. To put this into context, during President Trump's last year in office, Customs and Border Protection arrested 30,557 UACs who were accounted for and not lost. Conversely, in the first year of Biden's presidency, CBP arrested 147,975 UACs, most of which are unaccompanied for and lost. In 2023, Congressional Hearings, Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, and Director of Office of Refugee Resettlement, Robin Marcos, forced to admit that their agency had no contact with over 85,000 UACs. They were lost. What did DHS, HHS, and ORR do to correct this humanitarian disaster? Nothing. In fact, all three agencies created further policies and procedures to increase the efficiency of moving UACs from the border to the interior of the United States to unknown and unvetted sponsors. Unaccompanied alien children were being handed off to total strangers. Then they disappeared into the darkness of labor and sex trafficking. In fact, a year later, in August of 2024, the Inspector General, with oversight over DHS, issued a report stating the number lost UACs was not 85,000, it was over 320,000. My business partner, Ryan Matt, and I spent 6 months traveling across America, filming a documentary titled, "What is Treason Trafficked?" The evil of child sex trafficking is difficult to digest and understand. However, after conducting numerous interviews with officers, agents, and whistleblowers from every alphabet agency and department, it was made clear to us that the federal government knowingly and actively facilitated these criminal acts.
This is a very powerful statement, and I know it to be true. We have a situation right now that needs to be seriously investigated, and I've got one more article I'm going to pull up because I want to talk about ActBlue, and if you'll show that article, Chris, on ActBlue, this is the New York Post. The New York Post is reporting that again, ActBlue, the probe is widespread on Democratic fundraising platform. Okay, so far the fundraising platform ActBlue has only been investigated with regards to the money it took in to give to individual campaigns of Democrats. And since the FEC requires that campaign contributions be recorded to an individual or a group, has to have a social security number, otherwise an identifier, the ActBlue just stole the identity of millions of Americans to make these contributions to the various candidates. People didn't know their identities had been stolen. Maybe somebody had 2,000 campaign contributions made under their name. And then they realize that they are shocked. They say that they didn't do that. Okay, that's not the real corruption. That's real corruption, but the massive corruption been identified by a whistleblower named Sean Taylor. And Sean Taylor has produced some material which I think is incredibly shocking. And he's turned it over to me. I've turned it over. We brought it into the Department of Justice. So the investigation on ActBlue is going to expand into a money laundering scheme that involved mortgage loans. So some of the top officials of ActBlue would buy $1 million house, and they get a $150 million loan on it. And this was documented in LexisNexis, and you can see the loan amounts coming in through the banking system or through various loan brokers, which were set up basically as money laundering schemes. Now, the money coming into ActBlue, and Sean Taylor figured this out in Tennessee, where he was a assistant police chief, started investigating a scheme and bringing in drugs and underage children for sex trade coming up the waterways into Tennessee. And he traced this back to the border. And what they were doing was that they were, again, criminals were trading, dealing with the drugs and putting the children into sex slavery, making a lot of money. It was deposited in banks, including TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank. And then the banks had all this drug money. And so what they would do is they would have the local officials or participants in the scheme buy homes, and they would give massive mortgages to these people, which was just getting the money out of the bank into their accounts. And then over time, the deeds would disappear, or the loans would disappear from LexisNexis. The official records would be doctored, and those $1 million loans would disappear. That's how the money laundering was done. Now, we've also had programs here on Corsi Nation, which have tied in with Mike McCormick. And Mike McCormick was the stenographer for Joe Biden for many years. And he documented that this whole scheme of opening the borders with Joe Biden goes back to also the Catholic Church. We are having on our website, if you look on our website, we've actually devoted a section there to Mike McConnell. And Mike McConnell's section is, I think, extremely good. We're going to add another section here in the next few days for Sean Taylor's material. We're going to start posting it. We also have Craig Lund on Silicon Satan. And Craig Lund has suffered a poisoning attack. He's now was nearly killed. And again, Satan and the satanic followers in Silicon Valley have been after Craig for many, many years. But Craig has been insistent in exposing this evil. Okay, and you can see various podcasts that we've done on this. Now, let me explain the Vatican's involvement. So what the Vatican did was through Archbishop McCarrick in the Obama administration, they started working through Donahue, who was the chief of staff for President Obama, to have meetings with Joe Biden. And what they were saying is, let's open up an agreement with Honduras. President of Honduras and his son were both involved in the Sinaloa drug cartel, bringing marijuana and cocaine into the United States. Okay, so millions of dollars or billions of dollars were committed to this alliance for progress type arrangement with Honduras, the Biden administration. And what they did was they opened up the border. They made an agreement with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. That's when the millions started coming across the border. As you just heard from this Border Patrol agent, all the laws that Trump had put in place were rescinded by executive order when Biden took office. Of course, Biden probably didn't know anything about those executive orders. The auto pen probably signed them all. At any rate, with an open border, you now could flood the country with fentanyl, with cocaine, with crack cocaine, any kind of drugs you wanted, and 300,000 unaccompanied children, unaccompanied minors, who were picked up and sold to sex slavery. And the profits of this money went into the banks. Banks took this money and money laundered it into the NGOs under ActBlue. And this scheme paid political campaigns, and it paid for NGOs like Antifa and Black Lives Matters. Okay, so we can now connect these dots, and we have a research that took 15 years from Sean Taylor, and we're going to start posting it on this website. And we're going to start talking about it and broadcasting it and pressing the Department of Justice to open up an investigation on ActBlue that extends into the mortgage laundering, money laundering scheme, which we can document. It's a shocking story. Chris, I want you to come on and comment about this, because this, I think, is one of the most shocking stories we've ever investigated.
Well, the news media has for a long time portrayed the Democrats as altruistic, never lying and never cheating, and that was the narrative for a very long time. And this is
Obama,
right.
you know,
Obama's pretty. Yeah, Obama can do anything because he's pretty.
Heal the earth.
Yes, the walking messiahs, if you will, and that's why these fact checkers that appeared during the late Bush administration disappeared for 8 years, came back during the first 4 years of Trump, and then kind of got lost along their way during the Biden years, and then came back during the Trump years. So
the fact finders all they're doing is producing counter narratives generated by the CIA to undermine truthful stories.
and they only show up when the Democrats are not in charge, pretty much, and that's by design. So
Yeah,
now
they
you're
don't
now you're
fact find
watching.
the Democrats. They don't
Right.
fact find the Democrats.
So now you're watching their major financial arm, ActBlue, coming doing all of this and found to have done this. It's almost put people who have been cultish in this respect in a tizzy. And the journalists, they haven't the mainstream journalists have done very little, if anything, on this. because they're afraid to investigate it. I mean, that's my opinion. They're afraid to investigate and find themselves a story.
Well, certainly they haven't done it.
Right.
And these children are now being raped and their lives are being ruined, and no one seems to care. And those who do care are fighting an uphill battle because the mainstream media and the pedophilia is massive. The amount of corruption that the Democratic Party has produced, you can see by who they are championing and what they advocate. So you've got, AOC and this Ilham Omar and all these others, that are representing the Democratic Party, which are anti-American, destroy America, and they're trying to champion those who hate America, pro-Palestinian movements, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and these are destructive elements. The book I wrote, I think, which is the seminal book on this, which is The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, is correct. We're entering into the anarchy phase with the Democratic Party. It's become a neo-Marxist. There's the book, and I solidly recommend you read it. This is starting to get read worldwide. A bookstore in London just ordered 10 copies of it and put it in their window. I think we've got to promote this book. It takes a little effort to read it, but if you do, you're going to find the deep truths about the corruption of political philosophy, into how it got into this modernism and how it got into the critical race theory, and explains why we are where we are today with all of the satanic ideas that are gaining prominence. Donald Trump is fighting them, but it's going to take a long time to get these ideas out of our culture. I want to do one final story and quickly, but also, Chris, show, if you would, the book from Swiss America, because I'm continuing to say to people and try to mention through the show, if you like us, what we're doing, support our sponsors. Gold is still trading at $3,338 an ounce. Silver at $36.56 an ounce. If you can get some gold or silver in your hands, that asset's going to increase in value. I can see gold going to $4,000 an ounce very easily this year. Because once we get into the fall, we're going to find a financial crisis. The United States has $37 trillion in debt. I think that's going to be the next major issue we have to deal with. And you can get a free copy of this book by calling Swiss America, 1-800-519-6268. The book is How the Coming Global Crash Will Create an Historic Gold Rush. And it's happening right now. But please take advantage of this. Explore the Swiss America on our site. There's a lot of good free materials you can download. And you'll educate yourself about the economics, which I think is extremely important to do, because in the fall you're going to need to know which way the world is going in order to preserve purchasing power and the money you have. Okay, Chris is showing you various things on the Swiss America website. The Walking in Liberty $50 offer for those who become customers, first-time offer. One time for the new customers, you can get up to 250 of these Walking in Liberty $50 at virtually their value in silver. It's a very, very good offer. And so talk to Swiss America, and I think you can put up the 800 number once again, Chris, and I'll read it one more time. But I want people to take this seriously and start attending to your own financial security. 1-800-519-6268. Okay, the last story I want to cover has to do with this CIA agent who tested. His name is Gary Bernstein, Bernstein. I'll play a couple minutes here of his testimony. He broadcast like a podcast or a video message saying he's investigated money laundering, many things, and he now has a whistleblower that's saying that the Department of Justice is about to lose testimony from a former Venezuelan intelligence chief whose name is Hugo Caravajal, 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 and he has a lot of knowledge of the election interference in 2020 continuing to today from Venezuela. Let's play a couple minutes of this, Chris.
A public appeal to President Donald Trump in an open letter video, calling on the president to save a potential key witness of the 2020 election fraud. The witness is the former head of Venezuela's intelligence service. Now, this is another important key to the thread I've been putting out on X that explains both the 2020 election and ultimately how the 2024 election was saved. Now, I'm going to play this video in its entirety because it's very, very important, and I think everyone must see it. Here is Mr. Gary Bernstein.
Dear Mr. President, my name is Gary Bernstein. I'm a retired CIA senior operations officer and former chief of station. I've had the privilege of leading a dedicated team of whistleblowers who have uncovered critical information about the 2020 election fraud, which we've shared with the Department of Justice and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Additionally, I provided the first reports on the dangerous Tren de la Aragua gang to U.S. law enforcement and have contributed to some of the largest money laundering investigations ever submitted to the U.S. government. A key component of proof of the 2020 election theft is about to be squandered. I'm reaching out because we need your leadership to address an urgent matter to protect our nation's security. The DOJ is about to lose critical testimony from a witness willing to cooperate in investigations of election fraud, espionage, and Tren de la Aragua. Instead of seeking this testimony and a trove of supporting documents, the DOJ is putting this witness on trial next week on a decade-old drug trafficking charge. In 2021, General Hugo Carvajal, the former head of Venezuela's military intelligence under Hugo Chavez, was arrested in Spain. He was extradited to the U.S. in July 2023. Carvajal has been in federal custody in New York for 2 years. As Chavez's trusted confidant, Carvajal has unparalleled knowledge of Venezuela's primary role in U.S. and global election fraud, the creation and spread of Tren de la Aragua into the U.S. and beyond, and intelligence operations involving Cuban, Russian, Chinese, and Iranian intelligence services against our country. Carvajal's firsthand testimony is key to prosecuting the conspirators involved in stealing the 2020 election. Carvajal also knows which U.S. citizens have been compromised by the Venezuelan regime. That knowledge alone puts him in danger, even inside the United States. Although he is no angel, his cooperation will start a cascade of other witnesses willing to cooperate finally falls apart. His knowledge of the networks of espionage agents for America's enemies is key to preventing more damage from espionage and sabotage. Here's the immediate concern. The DOJ's Southern District of New York and Principal Associate Attorney General Emile Beauvais plan to focus solely on prosecuting Carvajal for a 2011 drug trafficking charge. They see him as a common drug trafficking suspect and are ignoring his knowledge of the 2020 election fraud and of hostile intelligence activities against the United States. There are indications that the Venezuelan regime.
I think we got the picture here, and I encourage you to watch this. It's on the Lindell TV, and the point is that the Southern District of New York is corrupt, and it wants to prevent Caraval from giving his testimony, which ultimately lead the corruption again of the Democratic Party and Democrats in office, including Obama and Biden. And the evil here of stealing the 2020 election is apparent from many different angles. But as President Trump is bearing down on foreign interference in our elections and penetration of our computers, which our data, God's Five Stones documents, you're going to see that this is a massive problem, and that by indicting and convicting Caraval for espionage, not for espionage, but for drug charges, they'll put him in prison as a common criminal. which effectively seals away the testimony he could give because the Democrats don't want that testimony given. Department of Justice is still riddled with legacy employees who are preventing operations, preventing investigations. Ed Martin and likes of Ed Martin are understaffed yet. And hopefully this big bill will get through Congress and we'll get the money we need to get real law enforcement agents in place in the Department of Justice. But until we fire 90% of the existing legacy employees, these departments are going to continue to resist Donald Trump. There's a lot going on in this program today, and we'll be developing God's Five Stones to also include the ActBlue investigation. And we'll need your support and continuing support to make this successful. Thank you for joining us today. In the end, God always wins. We're in a very, very difficult period in our history. There's a lot of the massive corruption is overwhelming. But I again encourage you in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14 to join me getting down on your knees and asking God to forgive us for letting this massive corruption pervade our country. And if we do so honestly and imploring God's assistance, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. And we're at that point. But in the end, God always wins. I'm just trying to prevent nuclear war. I'm trying to get child trafficking solved. I'm trying to get the elections secure. These are issues I've been fighting for decades. And finally, after having written Atomic Iran in 2005, 20 years later, I see something being done to destroy and eliminate the atomic threat that Iran has represented for the last 2 decades. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you for joining us on CorsiNation.com. We'll do a podcast every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.